Barbarian Masteries are odd. On one hand, they are great for improving damage for a specific weapon type, and pretty much guaranteed grabs for any melee barbarian and even throwing barbarians, though on the other hand, they do restrict your weapon flexibility with the character unless you burn a respec. Though that said, they do hold their own little piles of secrets, quirks, and useful improvements that many new and even moderately experienced players may not know about. Starting out, there are 6 masteries. Blade Mastery, which boosts your abilities with daggers as well as both one- and two-handed swords. That importantly allows it to apply to melee attacks with throwing daggers in Resurrected, which is something that was not available in Lord of Destruction or Classic because, well, they didn't include daggers there. Axe Mastery, which boosts your abilities with one-handed, two-handed, and throwing axes, though it does, like Blade Mastery, only apply when you are chopping at them in melee. Mace Mastery, which boosts your abilities with both one- and two-handed blunt weapons, which not just includes maces, hammers, and clubs, but also wands, scepters, and staves as well, with one of the most popular crossovers being Ribcracker. Polearm Mastery, which is sadly the least interesting of the batch, only applying to swinging polearms like halberds, scythes, etc., and nothing else. Throwing Mastery, which only applies whenever you use an explicit throwing ability on knives, axes, and javelins, but got some pretty drastic changes in 2.4 with the ability to preserve ammo as well as pierce with throwing weapons at least, not to mention critical strikes replenishing quantity as well. And finally, Spear Mastery, which applies to spears and javelins, though again, like Blade and Axe Mastery, only when the weapons are used with melee skills, so no, you cannot double dip with Throwing Mastery. And with the exception of Throwing Mastery, they all apply about the same with increased attack rating, damage, and critical strike, though it is worth noting that it is a special critical strike that is considered separate from equipment critical strike and deadly strike, so it is not directly stacked on them. So if you have, say, 30% critical strike from Mastery and 70% from equipment, you still will not have 100% critical strike chance, but rather a separate 30% and 70% chance because they're separate. And as always, if one triggers, the rest are ignored, though Mastery, like other critical strikes, cannot bypass critical strike restrictions on skills like Sacrifice, which just flat out cannot crit. Now, Throwing Mastery is especially quirky, both due to the replenishing quantity, pierce, and ammo preservation aspects placed on it in 2.4, but it also has an oddly ignored quirk due to being more of a gimmick skill prior to the patch, and that is a bug present in Lord of Destruction that sneakily doubled the Mastery's damage boost on single throws. So you'd actually do more damage per throw chucking a single javelin with a shield than without, though obviously each throw would be much slower than whenever you're using double throw, just due to the raw mechanics of it, so it is just a fun little trade-off for durability. As far as Mastery strategy, you usually want to choose just one and go with it, though with Throwing Mastery there is some room for dual masteries if you go point light setups like Whirlwind and Double Throw or unbuffed Berserk, though these are the exceptions, not the rule, and most players will favor spending most of their points on Warcries and Synergies rather than a second Mastery since, as said earlier, you cannot double dip. It's just one applies exclusively to throwing, the rest only apply to melee. So, what's your favorite mastery type in the Barbarian? Do any of them seem to be less loved or less useful than others? Mention it down below, and when we do get back to doing the build guides, expect at least one of each mastery for the sake of fun. And of course, a special thanks to the channel members and patrons for their continued support.